Because Jesus has called us to be difference makers. Jesus was a difference maker when he was on the earth. Everywhere he went, crazy things happened. And he didn't try to make them happen.
Grew up playing with bands, and on really small scale, like garage bands, not really playing in front of people per se, but it wasn't until I moved to Chicago that I was getting those kind of opportunities. At the beginning of Leper, we had a bass player that had this idea in his head that we needed to do whatever it takes to make the scene, and we need to be exclusive, and we need to only play for the kind of people that like our kind of music, and that really bothered me. And then you back it up before that, I used to have a friend that, he was a metal guy. He was a metal friend. And he had this common thing he liked to say that, metal is the only kind of music that really matters. The only reason you don't play metal is because you don't have the talent or creativity to do it. That's the only reason why you play something else, is because you don't know how. And then I had another friend who would say, the only reason anybody plays metal is because they lack the creativity or intelligence to play anything else. And of course I sit in the middle, because I kind of like both things, which is, so I'm just sitting in the middle and thinking, you're both wrong. You can't, that doesn't work. To exclusify yourself to one thing, one scene. And I moved here, and here was this new guy I was playing with, and he's kind of got that same mentality. And I've noticed a lot of people have had that. My church experience growing up was, I didn't go to church with a tie and a suit, because that was stupid. Why would anybody just do that? I was always a rock and roll kid, so of course I'm not going to go get me a suit just because I go to church now. When I got saved, it was because of the Christian rock scene, and it didn't make sense to me to change my appearance when the message that I had been given was that God doesn't look at the appearance. He's looking at my heart, and what am I thinking? What am I doing? How am I treating people? And that became my big focus. So I got a lot of kicked around in my church before, where I had grown up in, for not conforming, as it were. I was always the outcast guy. And the elitists just did their own thing, and I guess you could say they wouldn't let me in because I wouldn't elite with them. So I had that experience, and then I come to Chicago, and I'm going to Cornerstone, and I was hanging out at the Asylum Tent, and I was seeing a lot of that around Cornerstone, and hearing a lot of people talk about that around Cornerstone. That it's just like, if you're a punk rocker, you only hang out at this stage. If you're an alternative kid, you only go to this stage, and it's very segregated, and which is disappointing, because there's so many things to look at, there's so many things to hear, and so many people to talk with, and so many cultures. When I first moved to Chicago, the big thing for me that I was excited about was so many different cultures that I could explore, so many different people from other countries and nationalities. It's like, and I get to be exposed to all of it, all, like, now, because where I grew up, there wasn't anything like that. I think I had a lady that ran the school library was from England, and that was like it. And I had a lot of Puerto Rican friends growing up, but because I grew up with them, it just never occurred to me that they were from somewhere else. The neighborhood I grew up in was very, very mixed and very diverse, and so I just grew up with this natural kind of, whoever you are, that's just who you are. So when I moved to Chicago, and there I am in the midst of all these different cultures, all these different people, and it was awesome. And I'm hanging out at Cornerstone, and I remember that when I started hanging out at the Asylum, which was the cool goth thing. So, my wife was really into that stuff. So of course I'm gonna go be there with her. Just for the record, Leper was not intended to be a goth band at the beginning. We were supposed to be a ripoff of Pink Floyd, which I guess is not really that far from that anyways. But so we're hanging out here, and we were. I did notice that there was a lot of elitism there, a lot of snobby people. It just drove me crazy. Again, it's still like everywhere I go, when I run into like any kind of snob thing, it just eats at me, and I just want to punch somebody. But I would never do that, because that's just I'm a mousy guy, and I might get in a fight with Darren someday, because he's just gonna push me too far. I just know it. But it's the shifty eyes. But what was fun is, as I started hanging around the Asylum and getting to know these people, and I think it was like 2 or 3 years later that Leper was finally born, and we were starting. I don't think we had played then that year. That would have been 2002. I don't think we didn't play an official stage yet. I had talked with somebody at the Asylum. They, whoever was in charge of it at the time, asked me if I would consider playing there, because they wanted, So we were the first band to play at the Asylum as a stage, and don't quite get how that worked out or why it worked out, and I'm not entirely sure how this time frame worked, but I do remember there was a time where, cause I had a friend who was hanging out at what we call the Hobo Village. He had grown up at Japuza, where I live, and his dad is Tony Croak from The Crossing, if anybody knows who that is. But he came to me and said, "I saw I heard you're playing at the Asylum. I'm going to be there, because we were friends." And they're like, "Okay, that's great, but bring all your crusty punk friends. Bring them all." I said, "Yeah, I'll do it." And sure enough, the entire Hobo Village filled in the Asylum tent, and so that was probably the first time. I might be wrong, but I feel like that was the first time we had people who weren't goth hanging out with the goths, which was magical. We had broken down a barrier. My wife was a little upset with that, because she didn't get to watch anybody dance, because there wasn't room for anybody to dance, and it was full. So that was a step at breaking down, like I said, breaking down that wall of that elitism thing, that mentality. It was just, and I keep running into it still, I suppose. And I've said things, just for the record, if anybody here has ever heard me say something that sounded snobby or whatever, I apologize. I'm sure I wasn't serious. I make jokes like that all the time because it's aggravating to me. So I joke about it, and sometimes I'll say things to somebody because I'm hoping that they'll hear it and realize what they're doing, that they're being a snob. Like if they hear it, then they'll stop doing it. But that usually doesn't work. It just goes right over their head. I feel like that's all I have to say, and I know I have more to say than that, but I feel like if we really want to see change, we've heard this a million times, right? How do we see change in festivals like this? How do we see change in the church at large? And it always goes back to acceptance. Everybody wants to talk about acceptance. Everybody wants to talk about, we need to be all inclusive. We need to invite this person or that person and not care what they are, and not care who they look like or how they're dressed or whatever. But then we turn right around, and so many people will say that, and they'll turn right around and push somebody aside because they're they don't fit in with what they're doing. I had met a guy once, without naming names, he wanted to start a thing. He wanted it to be like he wanted to break down some barriers, break down some walls. He wanted to see some unity because he saw at Cornerstone Festival that all the segregation, it was bothering him. He was really involved with the hardcore scene for a lot of years, and he confessed that he was guilty of, somebody had thrown smoke bombs into the asylum one year, and he admitted to me that he was the one that did that. Because he just wanted to pick on the goth kids, because in his words, they're just dumb, so they're worth being picked on. And now he was coming to me to apologize and saying that he wanted to see an end to the segregation, and would I help? And of course I'm going to help with that. And we had partnered together. He worked up a poster. It was like a hardcore hand shaking hands with a goth hand. It looked really cool. And unfortunately, the other guys that he had on his side that were helping him put everything together, they said they were on board, but then they were very exclusive. They wouldn't let it go. They wouldn't open their doors. I actually heard the guy say, one of these guys say, I really don't care what you say your mission is. If you're not popular, I'm not going to book you at my venue. Wow. Which is backwards. Isn't it? I mean, if we're supposed to be all on the same page, we have the same mission. We all are supposed to care about people and each other. Shouldn't we be inviting, if somebody's like brand new to the scene, we don't want them to thrive because they don't look like us, or because they don't fit in with our scene or whatever. Some of these new bands, and of course I'm going to go back to that because I'm a band, but I've seen so many bands get hurt or give up because no one will give them a chance, because they want to play one thing, but the people who are in control of the venues or whatever, or the ones that are booking, they're interested in something else, and a lot of them are interested in the money and the numbers. They don't want to bring in these little guys and give them a chance to become the big guys, which makes no sense. And of course now I'm going to start harping on that, but in the midst of all of this stuff and all of these things that I've heard so many people say, we want to bring in this, we want these people and these people, as long as they fit in with our criteria, or as long as they're willing to change to our criteria, which was my church upbringing. We want this weird, poor, impoverished rock and roll kid to come to our church, as long as he starts to fit in with what we think Christianity is. But Christianity isn't going to church. It has nothing to do with being in church. The early Christians, the apostles that followed Jesus around, they weren't going to a building once a week. They were just hanging out. They were just living. They were just taking care of each other. And that's what made it explode, was people caring about people and not caring about where they came from, not caring about, this guy's a zealot, we don't want him here, or this guy's a tax collector, we want him here. And we all know that story. We all know all of those stories, and why it would have exploded and grew and grew and grew. Cornerstone, I wasn't there at the beginning, but I've heard so many stories. And it looks to me like it started with, it was that kind of mentality. We don't care who you are. Come over here. We'll give these little bands a chance to grow and to become the choir. I don't know if anybody's here has ever heard of them. They played the very first Cornerstone ever. In my opinion, they're one of the biggest bands that ever existed. They're one of the greatest bands that ever existed anyway. But what would they have done? There's a band, POD, I don't know if anybody's heard of them, but nobody knew who they were before they played Cornerstone. And they exploded, and they've been like everywhere. They're gigantic. They were. That might not have happened if they hadn't played Cornerstone. That used to be the hub. If you were in a band and you wanted to play somewhere and get a start, you went to Cornerstone to get your start. And so much stuff and so much art has come out of that effort, that inclusiveness. And I think that we get hung up on like here. It's like we're all. I think we're all hoping to see that happen here. I would like to see that happen here because I didn't go to Cornerstone for very long before it ended, and so I wasn't ready for it, and I didn't have enough yet, which is why I've been coming here ever since, because I still want more. I still, I love this, all this stuff that happens here. The difference, the diversity in music and art. And it would be nice to see like an art stage where it was just paintings and sculptures. That would be a cool thing to bring those kind of people in. I don't think I've seen that here. Needless to say, being a snob as a Christian doesn't work. There's no way to justify that. And I will admit, when it comes to coffee, I become a snob. I like dark roast. I walk into Starbucks, and if they don't have a dark roast, I drop my head and I just walk out. And because I want them to know that I'm upset that there's no dark roast available for me, because I am important more than everybody else. And they still, to this day, they still don't have dark roast. They have that blonde thing all the time that tastes like battery acid. I don't know how in the world anybody drinks that, but so to be a snob as a Christian doesn't work. I mean, Jesus talked about so many things during his time here. So many things that leans towards that concept, that we can't exclude somebody for any reason. The apostles, there's that story. They came to him and said, we heard these guys, they were preaching and teaching in your name and all that stuff, and they weren't part of our number, so we told them to stop. And Jesus said, don't tell them to stop.
Right.
Leave them alone. If they're not against us, they're obviously for us. I mean, common sense. The way you treat the person you love the least is the way you love God the most. I've heard that a million times, and I took it to heart myself personally. I feel like if we're Christians, we have no right to ever dislike somebody.
Right.
And there's people that make me mad. There's people that I don't really have patience for like I should, and I might avoid, but it doesn't mean I dislike them. And it certainly doesn't mean I hate them, because I refuse to ever give into that. I guess I'm a Luke Skywalker on that level. I refuse to give in to hate, but I feel like I'm trailing off and I'm forgetting what I wanted to say.
Right.
So I guess I'm done. If we wanted, I think my final thought would be that if we want to see this place, we want to see Audiofeed grow, we may have to be inclusive to the bands we don't think we like. Doesn't mean giving up our conviction unto the Lord. It doesn't mean that we have to accept something that we don't flat out cannot agree with. But we do need to foster those relationships. And I know, again, real quick, I know a lot of people who stopped coming because they got their feelings hurt for whatever reason, and we may need to build some bridges. I think that it's a tough thing. It's a worthwhile thing, because I like all the faces I see here. I like to go on seeing them. I like to see the faces that aren't here that I remember seeing from before. So I think that's all I have.
Cool.
There's nothing left in the tank. So
Thank you, Scott.
thanks for listening.
Great.